Evening. Nicole, could you please test your mic?
Testing, testing.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to start in 1 minute so that we can start settling down.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. Today is February 7th, 2023. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and Madam City Clerk, not yet. Councilmember Sedmenyo, can you please do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please stand if you're able. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Madam City Clerk, can you please take roll?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Good evening. Councilmember Andrews?
Present.
Councilmember Goldstein?
Present.
Councilmember Marquette?
Present.
Councilmember Roach?
Present.
Councilmember Syrup?
Present.
Councilmember Sermenyo?
Here.
Mayor Salinas?
Present.
Thank you.
I'd like to call upon our city attorney if he can give a closed session announcement.
Greetings, Mayor. There are two announcements. First, on January 31st at 5:30 p.m., the council met in closed session pursuant to public notice and the Brown Act, and with all members present and no public comments. The council conferred with legal counsel and discussed anticipated litigation involving multiple potential claims. The council took no reportable action, and the closed session adjourned at 7 p.m. This evening at 5:30, the council met in closed session pursuant to public notice in the Brown Act. With all members present and no public comments, the council conducted the first of 3 sessions regarding the annual performance evaluation of the city clerk. The council took no reportable action. The council conducts annual performance evaluations of its 3 appointed officers, including the city clerk, city attorney, and city manager. And Mayor Salinas, can you indicate when this closed session adjourned? Approximately.
Yes, 6:29 p.m. approximately, yes.
That completes the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney, and I'd like to now turn to our presentations. We have 2 special presentations this evening. The first presentations is the Keep Hayward Cleaning Green Beautiful Yard Contest. This is the winner presentation. So I'd like to invite my colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Angela Andrews, to come down to the podium with me.
Good evening. On behalf of the City of Hayward and the Keep Hayward Clean and Green Task Force, we're happy to announce this year's, the year 2022 winners of the Beautiful Yard Contest. The Keep Hayward Green and Clean Task Force, our mission is to preserve the environment and enhance the visual appearance of the City of Hayward through the joint efforts of individuals, volunteer groups, businesses, and municipal resources by the means of community cleanup events, education and outreach, and clean and green policies. With that, I'll begin our presentation. So as you can see, the Keep Hayward Clean and Green Task Force was created by the City Council to help address issues impacting community appearance. Its mission is to preserve the environment and enhance the visual appearance of the City of Hayward through the joint efforts of individuals, volunteer groups, businesses, and municipal resources. The Hayward Beautiful Yard Contest is a reward-based approach to encourage residents to keep Hayward clean, green, and beautiful by acknowledging the hard work that goes into a bay-friendly yard. The criteria for the Beautiful Yard Contest is that the yard is clean and free of debris. It's always well maintained with foliage. Important is it reduces water usage, and also the use of native plants in landscaping is a big part of our criteria. And the winners will be announced by Mayor Salinas.
Nice. Okay. Do we have pictures of the yards or no?
I'm sorry?
Oh, there it is right there. It takes me a while. It takes me a while. Okay, so the third place winner, I want to make sure. Nice. Okay. So the third place winner I'd like to announce is Eunice. Wow, I got the second. Is it Leek? Wilczek. There you go. I thought it was two E's. Okay. Eunice Wilczek and David Bogart. In honor of your efforts of maintaining a beautiful and well-maintained yard that is clean and free of debris, reduces water usage, and has native plants and landscaping. Keep Hayward clean and green. # Beautiful Hayward Yard Contest. Third place winner, and congratulations. And then you can come up, and I guess you also get a gift card from Home Depot.
Thank you.
To continue your effort.
Thank you.
Wanted to put him in the middle?
And shout out to Fairway Park.
Oh, that is I've seen that house before. Okay, and now the second place winner is. I just want to look at that yard. Wow. I thought that was my house. No, I'm kidding. I was told. I'm kidding. It can be. Okay, so the second place winners are Iris and Edward de la Calzada. And in honor of your efforts at maintaining a beautiful and well-maintained yard that is clean and free of debris. Let me make sure it's clean and free of debris. You sure that wasn't just for that one photograph? And then clean and free of debris, reduces water usage. Okay, I see that. And has native plants and landscaping. Absolutely beautiful. Look at that. And then second place winner. Congratulations. Iris can come up. And then, let's see. And then the first place winner, nice, look at that. That's incredible. You know, when I was walking precincts, I think I took a picture of this house and showed it to my wife, and I said, this is the yard I want, but that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So first place winner is Sergey and Natalia, how do you say it? Melikov. In honor of your efforts at maintaining a beautiful and well-maintained yard that is clean and free of debris, reduces water usage, and has native plants and landscaping. First place winners, Melikov family.
I also want to give out a big hand of applause to our beautification subcommittee who, their hard work and diligence is able to put this all together.
So I just want to thank all the Keep Hayward Clean and Green Task Force members. We did this program a while back, and I'm so happy to have it back in our community. It promotes community pride, less water usage, and just it really is a nice item to have at the beginning of a meeting. And we want to thank all the residents who came out tonight as well. Thank you for your efforts, and I hope you're an example for your streets so everyone can be a contender next year. So thank you.
Our next item is we have a proclamation to acknowledge Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and I believe we're going to have Nicole Daniels from Ruby's Place. She's on Zoom with us, and she's going to participate with us. I'm sorry, Vanessa. Okay. And who else? Oh, Vanessa Russell. Yeah, of course. Yeah. The what? Oh, from Love Never Fails. Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. So we have a proclamation here, and would you mind holding that up? Whereas human trafficking is a form of abuse in which force, fraud, or coercion is used to control victims for the purpose of commercial, sexual, or label exploitation, affecting people of all genders, ages, and racial and cultural backgrounds. And whereas the impact of human trafficking is wide-ranging and whether domestic or international, victims experience trauma, violence, manipulation, fraud, and coercion at the hands of their traffickers, and it is often the most vulnerable members of our communities who are affected by human trafficking. And whereas thousands of cases are reported nationally to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, with a majority of cases reported in California, and whereas 28% of those cases involved individuals who were trafficked as minors, and whereas Love Never Fails and Ruby's Place are committed to serving survivors of human trafficking and their children in order to restore them and the community, and whereas the City of Hayward is working to raise awareness so individuals will become more informed and able to identify ways their behavior contributes to a patriarchal culture that supports systemic abuse of vulnerable populations that include women and people of color. Now, therefore, I, Mark Salinas, Mayor of the City of Hayward, do hereby proclaim the month of January 2023 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month.
Okay. Maybe I'll go this way. And then I'll come back this way. No. So I just had a few words. First of all, thank you so much for your commitment and focus on survivors of human trafficking and the underlying vulnerabilities that often lead to human trafficking, such as poverty, a lack of education, mental illness, and homelessness. As was mentioned, I'm the founding executive director of Love Never Fails, Vanessa Russell, and we provide housing, workforce development, prevention, education, and outreach to survivors of human trafficking and other vulnerable populations across the city of Hayward and the region, really. And accepting this proclamation is really near and dear to my heart, especially in light of the recent developments across the Bay Area, which are devastating cities with the increase in demand for sex as a result of decriminalization laws such as SB 357. Bills such as these have decriminalized not only for the exploited, but also for buyers and exploiters, making it a buyer's haven to consume and harm our beloved vulnerable community members without repercussions. Harvard Business Law published a study titled, "Does Legalization of Prostitution Increase Human Trafficking?" And the findings were not a shock. Countries where prostitution is legalized have higher levels of human trafficking. I'm grateful to the City of Hayward for aligning with organizations such as Love Never Fails and Ruby's Place to address the needs of human trafficking survivors and to put their safety and the safety of the communities that they're being sold in first. We appreciate your support and advocacy for the hurting, for the broken, and for your celebration for those who are now reclaiming their lives. And so thank you so much.
Okay. I'd like to move forward to public comments. This is the section where people from the audience can make a comment on something that is on the agenda or not on the agenda. Is there anybody in the public that would like to make a public comment? I do have one public commenter here in the chamber, and this is by way of Fairway Park, California, Ms. Bonnie Moss. Yes, absolutely.
Good, because you're the ones I want to speak to. My name is Bonnie Moss, and I live at 31196 Faircliff Street in Hayward. Yes, Faircliff Street. And all of you know that a few weeks ago we were enduring horrible mudslides on our street, in our neighborhood, and up on the hills. I would look out my window and see these mudslides, and I remember around January 15th and 16th, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, are we gonna get through this one? And the next morning, who did I see? I saw the Hayward Fire Department down the street when I took my walk. I later on that day saw your city manager and your fire chief up on our street, touring these houses, talking to people, offering their care and concern. And so I am here tonight to simply say thank you and to publicly appreciate you and to appreciate your team for being awesome in our time of anxiety. I'm only one member of that neighborhood community, and my home was not hurt. I did have a moat around my house, but my home is fine. But I wanted to say that the kind of response that you all have authorized and led, the kind of response that your city manager has shown, the meeting I went to last night at the fire station where Mayor Salinas, you actually gave out your cell phone number to everybody there, and they got out their pens and they wrote them down. And also our two council members, Julie Roach and Dan Goldstein, were there, and I know all of you were supportive of this effort. But I just wanted to say thank you because the evidence was there last night. And the evidence was there in that folks were calling people by their first name or Mr. and Mrs., so like your team knew who these folks were. The level of candor, and most importantly, the vibe. The vibe was a spirit of goodwill. And Mayor Salinas, I especially want to thank you for showing up as the mayor and being so engaging. And also I want to thank your city manager because she rocks. She was pragmatic and candid and helpful and customer focused. And so I don't know that everybody feels the way I do, but I am proud to call Hayward my home. I'm proud to be a 29-year homeowner on Faircliff Street, and I'm especially proud that your team is one of a kind. I just don't know that this happens in other cities, and I work a lot with cities around the state, but I sure am glad that my city does the kind of customer-focused, responsive work that you all do. And I want to thank you, City Council, for all your work. I know it's hard, and it's long hours, and it's often selfless work that you do, but when the rain starts coming down and people are in need, it's really nice to know that the city is helpful. And I told my neighbors that. I said, our city is awesome, super competent. And last night, they looked back at me when I said, didn't I tell you they would be great? And people smiled, and they did say, yes, our city cares. So thank you very much. That's the only reason I'm here. Thank you.
Ms. Moss, we're here every Tuesday, and you can start. I'll make sure I start off public comments with you, except for the second and fifth Tuesday. But thank you for those kind words. I'd like to go to online here. We have, let's see, I don't know who. I think it's I'm going to start from the bottom up, and the bottom up. The first caller is. The last three numbers are 929.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Moreno. I'm a member of the Hayward Community Coalition. I'm here on behalf of a community member, Christina, whose 16-year-old child was assaulted by 4 members of the Hayward Police Department on January 20th during a traffic stop near the McDonald's on Watkins Street. This young man, an honor student with no criminal record, also an aspiring Marine, was removed from his car, handcuffed, and beaten by members of HPD. He suffered from multiple head and body contusions, blunt force traumas, and brain swelling. After the incident, Christina reached out to HPD multiple times to request reports, body cam footage, and any other information on the incident. But the department had refused to share the report, the names of the officers involved, or any other details, claiming that they could not because her son is a minor. This is despite the fact that she is named in the report and is the young man's legal guardian. The little information that has been released has contained many inconsistencies, and HPD's continued refusal to release records and body cam footage is in direct violation of SB 1421 and AB 748. We would like to thank council members Roche, Marquez, Zermeño, and Syrop, as well as City Manager McAdoo for their responses to the letter that we sent out on Monday. However, this is about more than filing a complaint about police misconduct. We want to understand why the city believes it is acceptable to withhold information about the assault of a minor just days after details about the horrific death of Tyree Nichols, who was also beaten during a traffic stop, were made available. We come to City Council to give you the opportunity to find justice and accountability for Christina and her family. We urge you to help her get the information she's entitled to according to the law, and make sure that City Manager McAdoo makes finding this information and justice for this family her top priority. We also want to ensure that any investigation process involves the voices of Christina and her son, because too often the victims themselves are rendered voiceless and unseen during this bureaucratic process. It is one thing to send out a statement, write a tweet, or attend a vigil, but this is a situation that happened to one of our families in our city by our police department. What are you, the city leaders, going to do about this? About a young man who was brutalized by our own police department, about a mother who is furious at the senseless beating that her son received. We must collectively ensure that there's individual and systemic accountability for the sake of our loved ones and community members. It's happened here and we need to address it. We can't be looking the other way. We can't keep ignoring these type of things. We demand in full view of your constituents that substantive action be taken immediately to begin repairing the damage done to this young man and his family. We and the people of Hayward will be awaiting your actions with great interest.
Mr. Morrell, I'd like to thank you. You've gone over time. I'd like to call the next caller is Cynthia Nunes.
Hi, yes, my name is Cynthia Nunes. I'm a member of the Hayward Community Coalition, also calling in on behalf of the community member Christina and her 16-year-old youth that was assaulted by HPD on January 20th. I just think that, again, we want to thank the council's members who have responded to our email, but I do want to re-highlight that simply filing a complaint is just not enough. There was statements released by HPD and the city. There's been tweets and social media statements being made all around the country in regards to the terrible death of Tyree Nichols. The thing is this thing that everybody is coming together and holding these vigils outside of council chambers are continuing to happen here in Hayward. We're very lucky that in this situation, we don't have another Tyree Nichols and that we don't have another Augie Gonzalez or Stoney Ramirez. We're tired of this happening in the city of Hayward, and this needs to be addressed. Again, we need council to come forward and actually use the power that you have to make a difference and fight for what's right and help this family get the justice that they deserve. The young man did not deserve to be brutalized. The young man repeatedly asked for medical attention and didn't receive that until the next day when his mother had to take him herself. This is so triggering for the community, especially in the same neighborhoods where there have been other police misconduct and other brutalities in the same neighborhood that Augie was killed in. This isn't okay. It continues to happen. How are you as council going to address this? And how are you as the city manager going to address this? A tweet, a statement is not enough. This mother deserves justice, and so does that 16-year-old child. I work in Hayward with youth. This could have been any one of the youth that I work with. It is way too often that this continues to happen. We demand that there is a full view for your constituents, that substantive action be taken immediately to begin repairing the damage done to this young man and his family. We're awaiting your actions with great interest. We would like to hear more from you about how you will actually take action to do something about this, not just file a complaint, but actually do something to support this family. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller is Colin Thormoto.
Hello, my name is Colin Thormoto, and I'm a member of the Hayward Community Coalition and a commissioner on the Community Services Commission. Yesterday, a letter was sent to the City Council, which I will now read into the record. Dear Council members, we are reaching out to you on behalf of a family that we are supporting and seeking more information on the brutal assault of her son. Christina's son was stopped in a traffic stop January 4th, 2023 at 4 p.m. near the McDonald's on Watkins, and during that time, her son was handcuffed and suffered from multiple contusions, blunt force traumas, and brain swelling due to 4 police officers, 3 male, 1 female, using excessive force on her 16-year-old child. Christina's son is an honor roll student with 0 criminal history. The mother has reached out to Hayward Police multiple times to request the report, body cam footage, and any other information from the incident, but they have not worked with her and have refused to share the report, names of officers involved, or details because her son is a minor, although she is on the report and is his legal guardian. There are many inconsistencies in the little information that HPD has decided to share while refusing to release records and body cam footage in blatant violation of SB 1421 and AB 748. Given recent news regarding Tyree Nichols, we are looking to you, city leaders, to prioritize confronting these same issues here in Hayward. As council members, you have an opportunity to help this mother get more information and accountability for her son. We urge you to help this mother and get the information she is entitled to in accordance with SB 1421 and AB 748, as well as make sure that Kelly McAdoo makes seeking information and justice for this family her top priority. Our need is for the investigation process to involve Christina and her son's voices. We must collectively ensure that there is individual and systemic accountability for the sake of our loved ones and community members. As city council members, it is not just a moral obligation, but it is a legal one. We expect council members to confront HPD over its violation of residents' rights to information and to live free of police brutality. We look forward to hearing from you. I've read this letter into the records so that all council members are made aware of the situation. We want to thank council members Roche, Marquez, Zermenio, and Styrup, as well as City Manager McAdoo for their responses to the letter. However, as has been said, this is about more than filing a complaint about police misconduct. We want to understand why the city believes it is acceptable to withhold information about the assault of a minor just days after the details of the death of Tyree Nichols was made available. We demand that the city fulfill their obligation to make the relevant police records available to this family of this young man, and further demand justice for a mother whose son was brutalized by city employees. We demand that substantive action be taken to immediately begin repairing the damage done to this young man and his family. We and the people of Hayward will be awaiting your responses with great interest. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Next caller is Jesse Gunn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Jesse Gunn. I'm a teacher here in Hayward and also a member of the Hayward Community Coalition. Council, by now, I hope that you have seen this report of the 16-year-old, now 17, who was assaulted by Hayward police on January 20th, that this student was sent to the hospital because of his injuries, suffering brain swelling from a head injury at the hands of our police. This could have been one of my students. Thankfully, he was not. What's worse is this could have been even worse. This could have been another name to remember and another vigil to attend. Mayor Salinas, I think it's fair to remind you of your public statement that you made following the news from Memphis. You said, and I quote, "In cases where use of force is applied, Hayward has multiple processes through which behavior is evaluated and determined whether the officer acted appropriately and lawfully." While I can understand the tendency to believe that Hayward is different, that something as tragic as the murder that happened in Memphis could never have happened here, how can you expect us to believe this is true when our council didn't even know about this incident until we told you? I would like to, if you would like to assure us that this can never happen in Hayward, you will first have to acknowledge and address the glaring history of police violence in our city and the current practices of our police department as it stands right now. I would like to imagine a future in which Hayward residents do not have to live in fear of police brutality. I would like to imagine a future where I don't have to make this phone call to you at this meeting. Until then, I find it unbelievable that at least our current present moment is one where our elected leaders don't know about a kid who was beaten by our police, where the counselors at that kid's school don't know about it. Council, either you are furious and saddened by this event here in our home, or you're just accepting that it's a normal part of life here in Hayward, our home. I'd like you to decide on that tonight, but I'd also like to hear what you intend to do about this beyond just filing a complaint that likely nobody will ever read. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller ends with letter numbers 038.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. I'm a Bay Area resident. I was really horrified to hear of another case of police brutality in Hayward, especially one when the victim is a child, a teenager. Hayward police wrote a statement condemning the death of Tyree Nichols. However, when it comes to this local case of a 16-year-old on his way to work, an honors student, beaten by police, where's the condemnation? You know, where's the outrage? On the heels of Alameda County DA announcing she's reopening the case of Augie Gonzalez killed by Hayward police, you know, we hear of this other police brutality targeting one of our children. And I would just like the council to sit with that there might be a cultural systematic problem with Hayward police. And a show of good faith today could be enforcing the law, enforcing the right to information of the mother, asking for the police report, asking for the body camera footage. I think it's really the least you can do. I'd like to cede the rest of my time for a moment of silence for Augie Gonzalez and everyone else that has been killed by police.
Is that it? I believe so. Yeah. Okay. I'd like to close public comment if there's no other commenters, and I'd like to move on to action items, which is the consent calendar.
City manager comments. Mayor.
Oh. And there is city manager comments. I apologize.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I know you don't necessarily want response to public comments, but I have emailed the juvenile's mother in response to the email that the council's received, have offered to meet with her along with our police chief. Obviously, we can't discuss the case because it involves a minor, and so, but I'm happy to share information with the council individually as you ask for it. And so with that, I just wanted to also share a couple of public comments or city manager comments from the library this evening. Just wanted to let the council and the community know the library will be launching the Makerspace at the downtown library this Saturday, February 11th. There will be an open house from noon to 2. Come see demonstrations of all of our Makerspace equipment, including the very cool 3D printer. There will also be a light up Valentine's craft for families, and all are invited. And then we are also proud to announce the launch of a new bilingual ASL spoken English story time at the library. We'll have an ASL storyteller and a children's librarian for stories, songs, and rhymes presented in American Sign Language and spoken English. The story times will be held on the fourth Saturday of every month at 11 a.m. At the downtown library in the children's story time room. These story times are intended for children ages 6 years and under and their families, and all are welcome. Thank you very much, and those are my comments this evening.
Thank you, and I apologize. Next item is action items, consent calendar, and I'll wait for a motion.
So moved.
Consent calendar moved by Councilmember Zermenio. Councilmember Sire would like to pull.
Agenda item 2 just to make a brief correction to it.
Okay. Is that all the Councilmember?
I also wanted to make a comment about item number 6.
Okay, so number 2 and number 6, and then.
I'd like to make a comment about number 7.
Number 7. No, we have not gotten a second yet, but, so if the motion maker would like to amend his motion.
Yes.
To all of them except for 2, 6,
and 7.
Correct. Seconded by Councilmember Marquez.
Yes, I'll second. Thank you.
And Madam City Clerk, if you can take the roll.
Yes, Mr. Meyer. Councilmember Andrews?
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein?
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Roche?
Aye.
Councilmember Sire?
Aye.
Councilmember Cermeño?
Yes.
Mayor Salinas?
Yes. Okay, number 2 is Councilmember Syro.
Thank you. On page 4 of the minutes at the bottom, it says.
What date?
Oh, sorry, January 24th.
Okay.
This is item 2.
Yep.
It says, in response to Councilmember Syrup inquiry about the proposed curb extensions, Director Mary noted they were painted outline extensions. I want to clarify that my question was whether or not they are physical curb extensions or merely painted. I believe Director Mary clarified that they are physical curb extensions, not just paint. Just want to add that into the minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Number 6, I believe, was was Councilmember Roach.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask staff on this one. In the resolution, there's a new program to start charging surcharges for overfilled trash receptacles and for trash receptacles that I think are compromised somehow with contamination. And I'm all for the contamination surcharges, but I am concerned. Tonight we're talking about a housing element and overcrowding and need of housing and how expensive it is. And I fear that this fee will really ding people who are living in multifamily housing, multi-generational housing. So I'm just concerned that this just becomes another fee on top of an overcrowding situation. So I guess my ask is to make that a really soft opening for this program, and perhaps consider not charging for the overfill, but maybe a continued education process, because I understand we're trying to also incentivize people to recycle and sort through their trash. So maybe I can just ask you about that.
I know Director Mary's on as well, but I can just say I know that the intention of the program is at least a soft launch with a lot of warnings at first as the monitoring is happening. I think we can talk with Waste Management, particularly around multifamily properties, and just being cognizant and cautious in those areas, and also looking at sort of where they are picking up in lower income census tracts, and just making sure that we're being a little more thoughtful about outreach and education in those neighborhoods. I don't know, Director Amiri, if you wanted to add anything else, but we can definitely have a follow-up conversation with Waste Management around that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because even if the ask for them is to maybe give them a one-time waiver for a larger receptacle or 2 receptacles where maybe they should only, yeah, I would appreciate that.
Director Amiri, did you want to add anything?
You covered it, City Manager. Just wanted to mention that one of our concerns was that when we have overflowing garbage cans with the winds and such, it actually contributes to trash in the environment, and we did not want to have that. So that was one of the reasons. And the other, as Councilman Rausch mentioned, is because we want to encourage our residents to continue to use the green card that they have for food, food waste and such, and reduce the amount of garbage so that they don't have overflowing garbage cans. We have gotten agreement from Waste Management to have a soft launch and actually, issue warning, as City Manager said, and notices before they go into the hard implementation mode. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think, yeah, as long as maybe we stay in touch about that one. All right, thank you. That's all, Mayor. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then before we proceed, I'd like to have a motion on item 2, and then and a vote, and then we'll go to number 6. So can I get a motion?
I'm happy to motion for item 2 as amended.
Yep. Moved by Councilmember Syrup.
I'll take a second.
Seconded by Councilmember Goldstein. Madam City Clerk, can you take roll?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Andrews?
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein?
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Syrup?
Yes.
Councilmember Roach?
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño?
Yes.
Mayor Salinas?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to have a motion for number 6.
I'll move number 6.
I'll second.
Moved by Councilmember Roach, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Andrews. Madam City Clerk, can you take the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Andrews?
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein?
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Roach?
Yes.
Councilmember Syrup?
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño?
G.
Mayor Salinas?
Yes. Now, item number 7, Mayor Pro Tem Andrews.
Thank you. Just a quick question regarding this. So the $20,000 that's going to the Russell City Reparative Justice Project, is that for moderating, or what is that for?
It's for whatever the group decides they want to use it for. So basically, we'll hold it in trust. It could be used for expenses related to the committee's work, but I think the intention is for it to actually go to either whatever of the items the committee ultimately comes up with as recommendations. So we could further appropriate those funds with the council once there's recommendations back.
Okay, and I know I'm not going to comment on other items related to Russell City. It's another agenda item. But for this one, I'm just curious if the steering committee was notified, and I should have asked this earlier, but I forgot to.
I believe they are aware of
Okay.
this donation, but we'll make sure that.
They are. They are aware of
Thanks,
the
Virginia.
donation, and it's specifically supposed to be earmarked for cultural enrichment. So it's related to a potential recommendation that may come forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, would you like to make the motion?
I'll move the item. Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Andrews, seconded by Councilmember Syrup. Madam City Clerk, you take the roll.
Yes, Madam. Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Andrews?
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein?
Yes.
Councilmember Marquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Roach?
Yes.
Councilmember Syrup?
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño?
Yes.
Mayor Salinas?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to go to public hearing, item number 8, which is the housing element. Adopt a resolution amending the general plan to include the 2023-2031 housing element. And this is a report from Acting Development Services Director Bowser and her very capable team of planners.
I believe Ms. Bowser is online. I don't know if she wants to introduce the item.
Thanks, City Manager McAdoo. Yes, it's a pleasure to introduce, and I'm going to very quickly turn this over to our amazing principal planner, Leah Schmidt, who has done a fantastic job spearheading the update to the 6-cycle housing element. And with that, I really want to quickly turn it over to her so that she can present this item to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, Mayor Salinas and members of the council. I'm so happy to be here in person, seeing all of your faces. And presenting on this housing element. I'm joined tonight by Jason Montague from Rincon. He's representing our consultant that helped us out. And Rincon was instrumental in developing a creative, holistic, and we believe compliant draft housing element that's before you. So tonight I'm going to present an overview of the housing element update, and then ultimately staff will request that the City Council adopt a resolution amending the general plan to incorporate this new draft housing element. So briefly, what is a housing element? It's a statutorily required general plan element of the general plan. It must be updated every 8 years, and it's the only element that's reviewed and approved by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. You'll hear HCD a lot. This cycle will run from 2023 to 2031, so it's an 8-year cycle. And it coincides with the release of the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, RHNA. And the RHNA is the number of housing units at varying levels of affordability that the state requires each jurisdiction in California, states and counties, to strive to build during that 8-year cycle. Hayward's RHNA for this housing element cycle is 4,624 housing units, split into income levels as shown on this slide. Income levels are updated annually, and they're tied to the area median income, or AMI, for the county. The current AMI for a family of 4 in Alameda County is $142,800. Thus, a household of 4 with an annual income of $112,800 is considered low income because they make less than 80% of the AMI. So you can see how the numbers on the left correspond. And as we know, that income level is commensurate with being a service worker, a teacher. Lots of individuals that work very hard are considered low income based on these numbers. An essential component of the housing element is that the city must demonstrate to the state that we have adequately zoned sites in the city to accommodate this RHNA. It's essential at this point to clarify that the city does not have to build the housing, and we do not have to finance the housing. The city has to demonstrate that there are enough sites to accommodate the housing. So we just have to plan for it. So the housing element has various sections as required by state law. These include public participation, housing needs, housing constraints, resources and inventory, a fair housing assessment, and a housing plan. Here's a timeline of the housing element. We started about a year and a half ago in July of 2021, and we kicked off public outreach soon after. Public outreach has been going on, community engagement throughout this project. On January 26th of 2023, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and considered the draft housing element and voted unanimously to recommend City Council approval of the document with the addition of an action to meet with trade unions and other construction labor groups annually to discuss opportunities to address labor constraints. Following this public hearing tonight, if it's adopted by the City Council, staff will submit a final updated housing element to HCD for certification. At City Council's request, city staff and the consultant worked diligently to get into the community to meet people where they are, to provide opportunities to learn about the housing element, and to provide feedback. Our public participation is summarized in the housing element itself and in Appendix A to that element. Briefly, I'm just going to sort of do an overview because I'm sure you guys have read it in detail. We started with a gallery walk, that bilingual posters that we placed around the city, library, City Hall, BART. We took it to farmers markets and events all around the city. We were at fairs, we were at elementary schools. We created a project website that had videos and articles that were interactive, explained, what is redlining, articles about the history of Hayward, and had interactive elements like tell us 3 stories about housing or give us your housing stories. And on the right side of the slide, you can sort of see some of the Instagram stories and responses that we got. We had a compilation of contact lists for community group and advocacy groups, neighborhood and HOAs, mobile home parks, and attendees at events. Our list of people that receive regular noticing about the housing element is well over 400 emails just based on this project. We had a social media campaign. Bilingual flyers were mailed to all Hayward households and handed out at various locations throughout the city. Here's an event at Tyrell Elementary where we used the posters and people would read them and write on Post-its and post them on the board. We had housing and climate surveys in multiple languages. We had a housing site simulation. We had a focus group with community resources for independent living to talk about individuals living with disabilities and their housing needs. And we held 4 community workshops on housing, environmental justice, and climate action planning. And then we had a partnership with Chabot Community College. 2 classes interviewed over 400 residents in Hayward to talk about housing, their hopes for the future, experiences of segregation, what community resources they use, pollution in their neighborhoods, and we created an interactive website so people could zoom in and read these stories. Staff also poured over all the interview responses, and quotes from all of these stories were sort of integrated into all the appendices in the housing element itself. This is all the individuals that were interviewed. It's just a snapshot, and you can see they were from all over the city. So the city staff prepared, along with Rincon, prepared a draft housing element that was released for a 30-day public review between July and August of 2022. We received 15 comment letters and responded to them sort of EIR style, where we had the comment bracketed and responded to every single one of the questions, every single one of the comments. And incorporated those responses into the housing element, updated the housing element, handed it off to HCD at the end of August, received comments November 29th, updated the housing element in conjunction with HCD's comments, which were provided to the council as an attachment to their staff report. Again, addressed all of HCD's comments in a bracketed, almost final EIR style so that they knew exactly where to look. And then city staff published the modified housing element with all the modifications and underline and strike through text so it was easy to find, and released it for a 15-day public review. State law requires a 10-day public review because we did it from about mid-December through early January. And then after this 15-day public review, city staff did meet with the Carpenters Union, and that's where the proposed actions to sort of meet with trades unions came out of that conversation, because the city staff believes that meeting with our allies in this struggle to find ways to develop more housing is a good idea without creating any undue constraints by adopting ordinances that could make housing development more expensive. So that was a sort of compromise. Okay, on to housing needs analysis. A deep dive of this information is contained in Appendix B to the housing element. Broadly, the population in Hayward is growing, it's getting older, and it's getting more diverse. Between 2010 and 2020, the population grew about 11.5%, which is slower than the previous decade, but it's larger growth than surrounding jurisdictions in the county as a whole. We've seen the population grow older. About 51% of our population is over the age of 35, and the median age is creeping up. We've also become more racially and ethnically diverse, with 40% of our population identifying as Hispanic, Latinx, 27% identifying as Asian, 16% identifying as white, 9% identifying as African American, 4.7% identifying as 2 or more races, and a little under 3% identifying as Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, American Indian, and Alaska Native. The median household income in Hayward hovers at about $87,000. This is based on sort of different data sets, so it's probably a bit higher now than it was in this data set. But it is lower than surrounding jurisdictions and the county median. Incomes are incrementally increasing, while housing costs are increasing exponentially. Specifically, rents have increased about 32%, and home values increased about 56% over the last decades. Incomes have not grown at that pace. As a result of the mismatch between income and housing prices, we've seen a crisis in affordability of housing. And that crisis disproportionately impacts renters, low-income households, people of color, special needs populations who experience higher housing cost burdens in that they spend more for housing. And this is not unique to Hayward. It's true throughout the Bay Area, it's true throughout California, and in many states around the country. The housing element also explores specific special needs populations, including senior households, female-headed single-family households, large family households, individuals with disabilities, students, those who live in poverty, and individuals experiencing homelessness. These are the households that are the least able to absorb large increases in housing costs in addition to food, healthcare, childcare, and other basic necessities. One of the big reasons for the housing crisis is a lack of housing supply. The majority of housing units in Hayward were built prior to 1999, and the housing development has not kept pace with population growth. There have only been about 5,300 housing units constructed, while the population increased by 20,000 people within the same time frame. As a result, we're seeing overcrowded conditions, people being priced out of Hayward, and an increase in individuals experiencing homelessness over the past couple of decades. This is reflected in the interviews that the Chabot students collected. A lot of the sort of overriding themes were about people staying in their houses longer as they grew older, about parents afraid that their kids wouldn't be able to buy a house, people feeling bad and lucky at the same time that they were able to get a house before this boom happened. And so this was a theme that we heard over and over again. We don't know what to do about our family. The housing element also examines constraints, and these were we took a deep dive into those constraints in Exhibit D to the housing element. And what we found is that there are layers of constraints, including governmental, market, and environmental. One of the major goals of the housing element is to identify and reduce or remove identified constraints to the extent feasible. As a result, the housing plan contains streamlining provisions for permitting, creation of objective standards to simplify the development review process, and other incentives for developers. However, the city has no control over significant market constraints such as the cost of land, the cost of materials, the cost of labor, and then financing residential development projects, which has become increasingly complex, particularly for affordable housing developments. Appendix C of the housing element contains an outline of various resources for housing development, including administrative and financial resources. It also contains a breakdown of how the city can theoretically achieve our RHNA. This table is in the staff report, and it's also in the housing element. It shows that between counting the 2,073 pending and approved projects, anticipating development of 320 ADUs, which is quite conservative actually over an 8-year period after what we've been seeing at the permit center, and then identified vacant and underutilized sites, we can realistically accommodate the RHNA that was allocated to us. that 4,600 number that I was talking about earlier, with an approximately 26% buffer at varying income levels. So vacant and underutilized sites were specifically chosen to meet HCD's criteria with regard to size and zoning, as well as the city's climate action goals to prioritize infill development in close proximity to transit and commercial services. This map shows the approved and pending projects in the city of Hayward. There are a total of 32 development projects. Of those, 7 are 100% affordable, 13 have affordable units included, so they're because of density bonus or affordable housing ordinance requirements, and the remaining 12 projects consist solely of market rate units affordable to above moderate income households. The projects are numbered and they are listed by address and project type along with the unit counts in Appendix C on Table C3. As you can see, the majority of development projects are located along Mission Boulevard in downtown Hayward in close proximity to transit and commercial services. However, there are some scattered at the west and eastern part of the city and at the southwestern, I'm sorry. This map is an overview of the potential development sites listed in the inventory. So the little polygons, the sort of fluorescent green ones are vacant. Thank you. And the yellow ones are non-vacant sites. They're primarily focused in the downtown Specific Plan area and Mission Boulevard form-based code area and on former Caltrans 238 properties. Our site's inventory reflects this development pattern because those areas are the most likely to develop during this 8-year cycle, because we look at the past development patterns in order to project into the future about where we think it's most likely to occur. It's also based on site criteria such as the ratio of land value to structure, land to value ratio, ages of structures, and then the density allowances on these sites. So based on analysis in the housing element, the realistic development capacity of these sites is about 3,449 units. And as already mentioned, that gives us a 26% buffer. So if some sites develop under the density, we still have capacity. In addition, as we showed in Appendix C, there are many sites that develop over capacity because of density bonus. So it is sort of a wash. It's also really important to note that development can and will occur on sites not included in this inventory. Just since we released this draft housing element, we've gotten 2 new development projects for 100 units on sites that were unknown at the time that this was published. And while the city's assumptions rest primarily on higher density development in specific areas, there will be additional incremental infill development in lower density neighborhoods throughout the city due to relaxed state laws related to accessory dwelling units and Senate Bill 9, which went into effect last year. Senate Bill 9 allows any single family parcel to be split into 2 lots and for a duplex to be built on each lot. So far, the city has received 3 SB 9 applications, but given the pattern of ADUs over the past 7 years, the city would expect to receive more SB 9 applications in the coming years, just through community outreach and education, and as financial instruments become available for homeowners to be able to capitalize on those improvements. The city also prepared a fair housing analysis, which is included as Appendix F to the housing element. The purpose of this section, which was new with this housing element cycle, is to provide an analysis of segregation and integration in patterns in Hayward relative to Alameda County, to talk about disparities in access to opportunity, and to provide an analysis of contributing factors to those patterns, historic and ongoing, and to address them in the housing plan. The section also requires that the city map the locations of approved, planned and proposed inventory sites against HCD opportunity area maps that show low, moderate, and high resource areas in the city. What's shown on this map is basically that all of the areas where we allow residential development are identified as low and moderate resource areas according to HUD and TCAC. The truth is that's not people's lived experiences on the ground. You know, I live in a low resource area, and that's not how I feel about my neighbors and my children playing around there. It's really just a theoretical modeling. And so what's more important is to show that the city has housing development scattered throughout the city. We are not just locating it in one specific area, as you can see from the dots. And the housing plan contains place-based strategies to really strategically invest in communities and to bring them up through both improvements to the housing as well as infrastructure improvements. The final section of the housing element is the housing plan. The housing plan contains a set of goals, policies, actions, objectives, timeframes, and importantly sets forth the responsible agency and funding source for achieving the action. The housing plan themes are shown on this slide. Under the theme of preserving, conserving, and improving housing stock, the city will continue the minor home repair program, a residential rental inspection program, and preserve at-risk affordable housing. Specific actions include monitoring developments at risk of converting from affordable to market rate because their loans are coming due from the deed restrictions, and preserving naturally occurring affordable housing. Under the theme of assisting in development of affordable housing, the city will issue notices of funding availability when funds are available, update the affordable housing ordinance to ensure that regulations do not inhibit development, and support households that participate in the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Under the theme of providing adequate housing sites, the city will ensure sites are zoned to accommodate the RHNA, no downzoning basically. Committing to specific timeframes for publicly owned land, adoption of new regulations related to replacement housing, by right approval for reused housing sites, there were 3 of them, and exploring zoning amendments related to allowing a variety of housing types subject to objective standards. And these include housing like supportive housing, group homes, emergency shelters, and others sort of implementing some of the regulations that were voted on tonight with the resolution that you adopted, suspending regulations on certain properties that are shelters. And it's sort of in conjunction with the human trafficking is that the city will be implementing over the next 2 years some amendments in order to ensure that those facilities can remain in place. Under the theme of removing constraints on housing development, the city will create a package of development incentives such as fee reductions and deferrals, expediting project reviews, adopting objective standards, streamlining ADUs, and monitoring and expanding the SB 9 program, ensuring that there's education across the city so people understand what this program is and that they can take advantage of it. Under the theme of housing for persons with special needs, the city will prioritize funding for affordable housing development to special needs populations. So applications will be weighted that serve those specific populations, continue to provide financial and administrative support to organizations and service providers that assist individuals experiencing homelessness, develop a shallow rent subsidy program, develop universal design guidelines, and update the reasonable accommodations ordinance to remove any discretionary findings, in addition to ongoing community outreach and education about available resources. Under the theme of equal housing for all persons, the city will provide foreclosure prevention and counseling, continue to fund fair housing services, continue to implement the rent stabilization, tenant protection, and relocation ordinance, provide support for fair chance housing for formerly incarcerated individuals or people with bad credit history, or that otherwise just need support finding housing, and updating the consolidated plan to ensure we receive CDBG funding. So fair housing actions are sort of threaded through all of these different themes I just talked about. They're focused on protecting residents from displacement. So you have your affordable housing, your funding to preserve naturally occurring affordable housing, providing place-based strategies such as your minor home repair, rental inspection, replacement housing ordinance, and other actions to improve low and moderate resource areas, and encouraging development of affordable housing throughout the city. And then just outreach and education. We're in CEQA, that means we're almost done. So an addendum was prepared looking at this as a discretionary action. An addendum to the general plan EIR was prepared, examining the housing element among other elements that will come forward in the coming months. And the addendum found that there were no new impacts, no increase in the severity of impacts, and that the general plan amendments analyzed would not require revisions to the EIR. And this is because you don't have to adopt land use changes. You don't have to increase densities. The city can accommodate the RHNA with the zoning that's in place right now. And all of that was analyzed not only in the general plan EIR, but in subsequent specific plan EIRs. And with that, staff does recommend that the City Council approve the general plan amendment to incorporate the 2023-2031 housing element update with action as recommended by staff, and approve related environmental analysis. Jason, Montague, and I are happy to answer any questions, and that concludes the presentation.
I just wanted to remind the council that I told you so, that she was very capable and very able. Okay, thank you. We have 17 hours of questions, so if you can stand by, let me go to questions. I believe Councilmember Cermeño was the first one.
Ms. Schmidt, thank you very much. Very detailed, very good, thorough report. So thanks again. I have a couple of questions. Number one, any possibility of us receiving RHNA numbers for other cities somewhere? I apologize if I didn't see it anywhere.
Sure thing. So because you told me this before the meeting, I looked it up on my phone very fast. And I didn't include it because we've provided RHNA sort of updates prior to this, and I didn't want to, I figured the 20-page staff report was enough, but because you asked, I focused on Alameda County. Dublin in 2015, their allocation was 2,285. In 2023, it went up to 3,719. San Leandro, 2015 number was 2,287. Their number went up to 3,855. City of Alameda, their 2015 allocation was 1,723. In 2023, their allocation is 5,353. Berkeley went up from 2,959 to 8,934. Fremont went from 5,455 to 12,897. Livermore went from 2,729 to 4,570. Piedmont went from 60 in 2015. Sorry, so unprofessional.
What's Atherton?
Yeah, the reason I asked.
Yeah, I know. I focused on Alameda. I was like, I could just keep going. But anyway, they went from 60 to 587. And Hayward, in 2015, our number was 3,920, and we went to 4624. Our increase relative to other jurisdictions was not significant.
The reason I asked.
I like to think it's because we're doing such a good job producing housing, but yeah, that's
I think we're doing a good job, but the reason I asked because in the past, other cities have been hesitant about building low-income housing, and I want to make sure that they also share the wealth that we have to. So, let's see. It sounds as per the chart on page 8 that we're going to be able to do it. Is that the correct assessment?
Correct.
Okay, good. All right. And then, of course, there's a list of constraints over on page 9. Again, from what I read, we are ready to deal with all those constraints in order to fulfill our RHNA numbers.
Well, the city can't do anything about, market constraints, as I described in the presentation. However, for the identified governmental constraints, which is like permitting, streamlining, the city is, currently working on objective standards, ordinance, which is going to come, I believe, before it came to you. You guys were talking about parking, I think, a week or two ago. That project we expect to be updated in the summer, and that should significantly streamline development in terms of letting people know exactly what we're looking for ahead of any public hearings, minimizing the back and forth between developers and city staff in terms of the permitting. So time frames will be reduced. So the city is committed to reducing governmental constraints,
right.
but environmental constraints are not within our purview, and market constraints are also not within the city's purview.
So it's good, we're prepared for that. The city requires us to build this housing. Do they also tell us if there are any height requirements in the buildings? Do they say, go ahead, if you don't have space because you don't have any more infill space, you can go up to 10 stories or 20? Is that something that within their purview?
The state's purview?
Uh-huh. Can they tell us you cannot build more than 6 units? Or go ahead and build up to 10. Is that something that they can do to us?
The state has adopted some recent laws that allow for certain densities and heights.
Okay.
And city staff are examining those laws. In fact, we have like a little study group.
Right.
We meet weekly.
Right.
We pore over the state laws and think about how they're going to impact us. The thing is, the city of Hayward is not going to be as impacted as other jurisdictions because the densities and the heights that the state are allowing are pretty much in line with what you as the city council have adopted. I think that the state in enacting some of these laws are not really targeting Hayward. They're targeting some other jurisdictions that will not allow high density development.
Okay.
But yes, the state does have some laws that allow for minimum densities and minimum heights.
To allow us to build. Does that also mean that they'll be giving us some money, or are we on our own?
We apply for grants on a regular basis.
Okay, so there's money out there. Newsom, that's what Newsom said. Okay, so we'll keep applying for those. Over on one of your slides, the one about inventory sites has one that the yellow says non-vacant sites. So I understand vacant sites that you can build on those, but what is a non-vacant site?
I'm going to kick this one over to Jason Montague because he is so eloquent about talking about non-vacant sites. Jason.
Yeah, sure. So as part of the sites inventory process, we start by looking at vacant sites in the city that are zoned for residential uses. Typically, there aren't enough residential vacant sites. So the next step in our process is to look for non-vacant sites, and these are underutilized sites that are based on a certain list of criteria that Leah pointed out earlier, such as improvement to land value ratio, which essentially means that the land is worth more than the improvements that are on it, and that which could indicate underutilization. Older structures, over 30 years old, low floor area ratio. There's a number of criteria that we look for a non-vacant site. And we also look at, we compare the sites to the development trends. So the map that was shown earlier showing all the trends in all of the projects that are currently in the entitlement process in the downtown and Mission Boulevard area. We align the non-vacant sites with those to see what are the development trends in the city to try to pick out sites that have a realistic potential of redevelopment within the housing element. Okay. So that's what that means. It just means that they aren't completely vacant. A parking lot is an improvement, so that's a non-vacant site. There are a number of parking lots in the site's inventory as well. The existing use of each parcel is also on the inventory in Appendix C. So
Okay, good. I understand underutilized sites. Does that include infill sites?
Correct.
Very good.
All of our sites are pretty much infill sites.
And thank you again for a good report. Nice to see you in person too.
Councilmember Syrup.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the report. This is the end of a 1.5 year long process, and so I think one presentation really doesn't do justice to how much effort and energy went into this. I asked a lot of questions. I make up the last 5 pages of Appendix A, and I appreciate your staff taking the time to answer each and every one of them. I am curious, on the very last page of the latest draft, we've crossed out construction of 200 affordable units as one of our objectives. I was wondering if you could explain that thinking.
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, you read closely, huh? I'm looking for my housing plan. It's because we replaced the state. They're so fun to work with. They allocated the RENA, and then in the letter said, we did give you RENA and we want you to plan for it, but we actually want you to have objectives that are higher than the RENA. And I was like, well, then why didn't you give us a number higher than the RENA? But anyway, okay. So what we did was we crossed out that line, but we changed it to new development. And in the new, on page 92, we changed it because new construction, we basically just changed the word and then put in 952 units in above moderate. And the reason why staff felt comfortable putting that in is because that's how many units over the above moderates the city has actually built in this last housing element cycle. So we didn't actually achieve our very low or moderate income levels in the 2015 to 2023 cycle, but we did exceed the above moderate. So staff felt like, okay, well, we'll say to HCD, our objective standard will be at least what we did in the last housing element cycle. There's nothing that says that once you reach a certain level, you just stop producing housing. But in order to just have it a little bit more clean, we changed that, we crossed out that 200 and tied it to an actual, number that we created in the last cycle. It just made more sense.
Got it. And so from what I'm hearing, we're trying to put numbers that we can realistically achieve. Is that the thinking?
Correct. Like we did last cycle, and it was more than 200.
Yeah.
It was 952.
Okay, because it makes me feel a little uneasy that we're just saying for the next 8 years, we're committing to no new affordable housing construction. And I guess, can you talk me down from that ledge?
Well, we are committing to try to develop 547 extremely low income, 528 very low income, 612 low income, and 817 moderate income units. That's a significant hurdle. If the city can build 600 extremely low income units, I am very confident that the city council will authorize in any way to do that. There's nothing here that precludes us from exceeding these numbers by a lot. It's just realistically, the city didn't want to be put into a position where we had to face HCD in 8 years and say, oh, we didn't meet our objective standards. But we put the own standard on ourselves. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas with the above moderate, we know that in the last cycle, the city built 952 more units. So that just seemed more realistic.
Understood. Thank you. And my follow-up question is, I know this is kind of the last stop before we adopt it and incorporate it into the general plan. For any friendly amendments to the resolution or to the housing element itself, is that better reserved for after public comment, or is there any room left for that in this meeting?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the meeting where you would be making any changes. But I'm not sure if this is the question period or if you want to wait.
I'll wait until.
And I would just also say, depending on what those changes might be, there's going to be lots of opportunities for the council to weigh in during the implementation elements of the different pieces of the housing element as well. So that may be our response back on some of the comments. So I just wanted to, but I think after we hear questions, then public comments, then come back for some of those questions.
Great.
Or comments.
I'll save my comments for after public comment. Thank you.
Okay, good. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation and the robust outreach work. I truly appreciate the comments about meeting people where they're at, and I feel that our community got to experience that, and it just made a big difference in this. So thank you so much for those efforts. They do not go unnoticed. In terms of constraints, I believe in December we launched our online permitting process. Do you feel that that will help with some of the internal constraints in terms of streamlining permitting? Do you envision that helping with those issues, or can you just kind of give us a take on if that's going to make it?
I think it will, yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, it's a steep learning curve, but the amount of education and commitment the development services and all the reviewing staff has put into it really will streamline development processes.
Okay, and as it relates to SB 9 and permitting for ADUs, I am getting some feedback from community members that aren't tech savvy. Do they have the option to still do the old school paper permits, or is it 100% online?
Oh, this is, the permit center, at City Hall, we're open Monday through Thursday from 9 to 1. There are 3 computers set up. So if someone came in with their paper, and they just have to make sure that they have scanned their documents and have them on a thumb drive or something. They can bring it all over, and city staff are there to help people load their applications into the online software.
Okay. And then in terms of tracking the RENA numbers, I know a while back I had asked for that information to be included on our staff reports just so we can keep a close eye. But who is responsible for tracking that in the city? Is it just one person? Is it collaboration, development services, and the housing manager? Like, how is that being tracked? Who's responsible for providing us those updates?
It's like an Excel spreadsheet that I update and work with Christina and her staff. Jane is the one who updates the table that goes into the staff reports. So yeah, it's the people you see presenting in front of you that keep track of all of that.
Okay, so it's definitely a team effort.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then in terms of our policy efforts with our state lobbyists, is there any pushback, as Councilmember Zermanuel mentioned? I'm happy that we're making this effort, that we're doing this, but I do still struggle with the fact that there are so many surrounding communities that haven't done their fair share. So are there any efforts on the state level to penalize, require, what else can be done? Because we're not going to resolve these regional issues on our own.
I think the builder's remedy that you've seen a lot in the media is kind of the primary one, where there's been, if you don't have a certified housing element or HCD is objecting, basically you are subject to what's called the builder's remedy, which means anyone can come in and develop anything without any city review of the projects, and so it's a pretty. There's already been some interesting projects proposed in Southern California. I think there was like a 30-story building on the beachfront and in some communities. So it's, we'll see where all that goes litigation-wise. But that is a pretty onerous, remedy. And I think a lot of cities that are historically notorious for not producing housing units have been slow to adopt their housing elements. So we'll likely be subject to that.
Okay. And are we subject to being fined? Because this was due, I believe, last month, correct? Are we?
It was due January 31st.
Okay.
So we're going to be 8 days late.
That's okay. It was on the calendar.
That's
it was
okay.
Public notice.
We're well positioned. We're okay. We actually, city staff already submitted the housing element that was reviewed publicly to just start, because HCD has very long review times, very long. And so to start that clock, it was submitted on January 4th. And so any amendments will just take to them, as minor adjustments, and hoping they don't restart the 60-day clock. But, the city, Hayward is well positioned. We're a bit ahead of some other jurisdictions.
Okay. And then my last question relates to displacement. Based off the presentation, because we have ordinance in place, I just want to have a clear understanding. People that want to continue to live in Hayward, and there's all these affordable housing opportunities coming up, help me understand how we're giving priority preference to people that have a history of living or working in Hayward.
I may ask City Clerk Miriam Lenz to bring Christina Morales on. I believe she's as a panelist. Can you elevate her? Because she may have more insight into that, or maybe the city attorney has information about fair housing. I'm just not as familiar.
Okay, thank you. And I could, if she needs time, we could also.
Please go ahead, Housing Manager Morales.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Yes, so as part of the Affordable Housing Ordinance, the developers have to commit their requirements to prioritize individuals who either live or work in the city of Hayward. As part of the requirements, they have to submit an affordable housing plan and sign an affordable housing agreement. And a condition of that is they have to send a marketing plan where staff reviews and ensures that the preference policy is implemented into their marketing strategy. And then the city staff has to review the applications for conformance with the eligibility requirements, including the preference policy. So staff is reviewing all the applications for the affordable units to make sure that preference policy was implemented.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I had similar questions about, what other jurisdictions are doing, because my understanding, almost no one's meeting their arena needs. And I think in Hayward, correct me if I'm wrong, but Hayward's doing better than most jurisdictions, a lot of jurisdictions, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I just, because we are doing such a good job on those numbers that I think, even though it seems like we're so far behind, we're still making really good progress compared to other areas. I just wanted to ask, this is a small thing, but on the home repair program, that if we're contemplating, that we're helping people as they do home repairs to be retrofitting for electric, so that, maybe that might be part of the climate policy later.
Correct. So this is a tie-in with the CAP. The same consultant is working on both, and what we are looking at is they would help people that are maybe like aging in place, that have disabilities, so you could improve your house that way. And then the CAP will have tie-in programs for retrofits for energy efficiency.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we can start getting close to that number. Okay. The other thing is, it's something that I meant to bring up on the, when I was on the Planning Commission, because we got to see this, do some of the work there about the inclusionary housing. Because we start off with a really strong statement that we're going to enforce the inclusionary housing, but then there's an or, and I think I would like to see the enforcement of the inclusionary housing, period, with some sort of staff exception or some allowable exceptions upon staff review to make it the stated policy be stronger. And perhaps I should be waiting to the comment period on this one. So maybe I'll just ask you about that one. As far as the inclusionary housing, what is the stated policy from the city?
Christina definitely would have, or Housing Manager Morales would definitely have more expertise in this area.
So the affordable housing ordinance allows developers to comply by either providing on-site inclusionary units or paying the affordable housing in lieu fee, doing off-site units, or proposing an alternative plan. So compliance for the most part has been taking place by providing the on-site units or paying the fee. And within this recent year, we've seen less fee payment and more on-site units than we've had in previous years. So the fee revenue and the on-site inclusionary units are targeting different demographics of the city. So the city needs to be collecting both the fee revenue and having the on-site inclusionary units in order to be able to provide diverse housing opportunities for community residents. Otherwise, the on-site inclusionary units, which are predominantly moderate income ownership units, don't necessarily meet the needs of community members that are at high risk of displacement.
Okay, thank you. I think the rest I'm going to wait for comment period. Thank you.
I believe it's Councilmember Andrews next. Oh, yeah, and Councilmember Andrews, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just have a couple of quick questions. On the opportunity map, I don't know if you want to pull back that slide, but I believe there is an opportunity on industrial in Tennyson, and I thought we've already have a development there. And just wanted to see why it was still considered an opportunity. I think it's in yellow. I could be confusing the map, but I wanted to just hear more about that particular area because it kind of stood out for me.
Okay, maybe Jason could talk about that particular site. I think are you talking about the site sort of just south of number 20 in the
right.
circle?
Is that, I just wanted to confirm if that was the location I was thinking of and if we just had a development that's getting built there now. I wanted to know.
So it looks like it's a vacant
Mm-hmm.
The large yellow
Yep.
parcel?
Yeah, it's a non-vacant site.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It's a parking lot. Let me find.
It might just be near where you're picturing.
Okay.
Maybe you could, Jason, if you want to pull up like the APN or something. I don't.
Yeah, I think I have the APN.
Don't worry about it. It said it was.
That's
that's
BART.
the income, but
Isn't
it was
that BART?
highlighting it as a opportunity site.
Yes,
I thought
it is
so. I was just trying to see how you were considering opportunity site if it was already a development there. Am I?
I think
looking at
that's
the
the
wrong
BART
Yeah,
parking lots.
It is, Leah.
thing? Is it okay?
Yes, and
Okay.
so that's a huge opportunity site.
So
It's so big.
That
Yeah.
was another question I was going to have about BART. So what are our interactions with BART in order to get more housing there? I know there's a lot of parking there, but then it sits empty most of the time. What can we do about getting a garage? Like, what are some things we can do there? with
Absolutely. BART sent letters to every jurisdiction and sort of put us into buckets, like here's more near-term development, mid-term development, and long-term development. BART put the downtown Hayward site into the more near-term development, and South Hayward BART into the more mid-term development. The likelihood of downtown, which just means the likelihood of downtown developing more quickly is more possible. The city still believes that South Hayward BART is a viable and really perfect. It's huge and it's right on top of transit. And so there was no reason not to include it. So the city will, based on actions in the housing plan, enter into MOUs, memorandums of understanding with BART to talk about sort of access and what are the plans and what the city can do to support development on those sites. That's basically what we're committing to on the South Hayward, on the BART sites.
Okay. And when you say near term, what does that mean?
Like within the next housing element cycle. So within 8 years. Midterm is not really within 8 years, but a lot of jurisdictions were put into that middle range bucket. And that's because markets fluctuate. Like we don't have a crystal ball, and the whole housing element is like create a plan for the next 8 years, even though you don't know anything that's going to happen, and interest rates just skyrocketed, and now it's like we don't know what's going to happen. It's just like our best guess, and truly that is a tremendous opportunity site for the city. It is really great, and if we could develop there, we should in terms of climate action goals, and so. That's
I'm just thinking that site alone could probably knock out a lot of our rent numbers. So is there any way we can look at near term? Is there, what would get us to push it over the edge that's within 4 years that something happens there instead of 8?
I think it's if there's a project that's being proposed. So, I mean, it's really going to be if the council wants to have staff sort of proactively go out and, I think what BART is basically saying is we don't have the staff to do anything on these sites, but if, the city wanted to prioritize it, we could probably work with BART staff, and if we did the staff work and did an RFQ for developers for the site, interest, I'm sure BART would love for us to do all their staff work for them. So I think that's how I would suggest if the council wanted to prioritize that in the next 3 to 4 years, that would probably be the best way to do it.
Okay. And then I still see a lot of sites on Mission as being the opportunity, and I know you all are checking in with our emergency services, but have they seen this and commented on this as still opportunity sites? Are they concerned about the traffic on Mission and being able to get to folks if there's an emergency?
There's adequate access along Mission.
Okay. All right. And then for the available amount of, I want to know how much is available, if you know, for the home repair program. I see $10,000 per household in the study, possibly up to, I guess, $10,000. Is there a total available that we can go after? Is it specified for Hayward, the max available? And then want to know are there people actually taking advantage of this program?
I think that's a CDBG program, and I believe we have a substantial amount allocated towards that. And we actually have a lot of residents that take advantage of it, especially like if people have water leaks. We actually have partnered with, you know, the water billing staff, and if someone sees a major leak and then if it's someone's having difficulty paying the bill or making repairs, they'll refer them over to community services staff. I believe that's what that funding pool is. And I want to say, you know, it's several $100,000 that we've got sitting in there.
Okay, I'll reserve comment on that. I don't want to get in trouble, so I'll reserve comment on that. And then, let's see. I had one more question. It was about the safety and environmental justice element. Can you tell me a little bit more about those elements? I did read about it, but wanted to hear more about how Hayward is, you know, researching and doing whatever it needs to do regarding those elements.
Absolutely. So the safety element is going to go to the Council Sustainability Committee in March.
Okay.
So that's where you'll see a draft element there. The modifications in that element release, we added a whole sea level rise section. There's a lot of green infrastructure information in there. And so there are definitely, there's new, like we brought it up to state law. State law also talked a lot about like wildfire risk, but the city of Hayward, like based on the mapping, we're not really like in a high wildfire risk area. And so you'll see that element. And then the environmental justice is drafted, and it will, we're hoping to bring safety and environmental justice in spring. To the Planning Commission and then to the City Council for adoption. A lot of the outreach for all of these elements occurred at the same time. It's just that I couldn't do it all. So I'm just gonna be honest, like I really couldn't do all of those elements and do them the justice that they needed. So decided to split it a bit. So that this is going first because we have deadlines from the state. Those will follow soon after. They're really close to being done. And then the CAP will probably come to you guys, we're thinking in the fall, but that's really headed up by our environmental services staff. So that's sort of how they all really did run together in terms of outreach, development of, you know, draft documents, but then just, it was just not possible to do them all.
Okay, no, I'm just happy to see that be included. And just want to know if GARE is going to be reviewing the environmental justice review.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's a great idea. It's very draft based on, we've had 3, I think, meetings with the community, but it's still like very draft. But it's better to have something to take a look at and bite into. But the environmental justice element itself is it's based on state law. State law says you have to talk about like these 5 topics, you know, so it's very like sort of the arc of it and the organization of it is pretty consistent for every jurisdiction.
Okay. And GARE is, sorry, I used the acronym. So it's Government Alliance
on Race and Equity.
And Race and Equity. Thank you. That's all for me. Thanks.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Thank you, Mayor. It's interesting. I seem to recall about 9 years ago starting on the General Plan Update Task Force, and then 7 years on Planning Commission, and now I'm here, and it's so much of what we've done is all around housing. I feel like I've kind of grown up in this, and what really amazes me is just the thoroughness over all these years that staff has applied. The outreach to the community has been truly outstanding. I've actually been shoulder to shoulder at some of these events where we're, you know, posting the Post-it notes on our feelings and attitudes and beliefs about housing. And it's one of the things that I just love about Hayward is that level of outreach and the participation that we get from the community. It's really outstanding. So I'm excited about this. And my question goes really to this. I think we've done an extraordinary effort on making sure that we're producing housing, and I still see a gap in affordability. And that gap of affordability that worries me the most is after we get people in the houses, when you consider the housing burden. So those statistics that you have in your report are really worrisome because it really says that about half of the people that we put into housing are at risk of losing their housing. And that would be a tragedy. You know, there's so many things that trigger, you know, a spiraling of a person's financial peril, all centered around housing affordability. So my question is, you'd mentioned a couple of programs about how we're going to keep people housed. Can you give me a little more detail? So for renters and for homeowners, how we can better sustain people, keep them in their homes once they're in?
So I can tell you that there's foreclosure prevention counseling, and there's that education and counseling that the city pays for. So people that need it can go to those obtain those services. I believe there's a shallow rent subsidy program that, with limited funding, maybe we're going to float. Christina, do you have any specific information about that program or others that you can share?
I don't have any about the shallow subsidy, but we also have our residential rent stabilization ordinance. So that provides rent increase limits for the covered units that are under the rent stabilization. Also includes the eviction for cause protection, anti-harassment legislation. We have our tenant relocation assistance ordinance. So if an individual is displaced due to a no-fault eviction, that the landlord would be responsible for paying 1 month's rent to help with relocation costs in addition to any deposit that's owed. And if it is a displacement related to the trying to do substantial rehabilitation to the property, there is a relocation assistance that's required to be paid, and that the tenant would have right of first refusal back into that unit without a large rent increase. So we have a number of ordinances in place for tenant protections, and then also focusing on the supply side, looking at building units that are targeting the income limits where we're seeing the highest cost burden. So looking at our displacement study, we found that there's a need for about 4,600 units that are priced below $1,250 a month. So really looking at the issue of cost burden holistically and using multiple legislation and housing resources to try to provide as many housing opportunities as possible, and also to keep people housed that are currently placed in housing.
All right, so it sounds like one of the gaps that we're still missing is when we're having perturbations in sorry, big word. Let me bring that down to earth here. When we're having problems in the economy and people being impacted, do we have resources at the county and state level to keep people housed?
So there have been programs in the county level for rental assistance, especially during COVID. There were programs for rental assistance. The city started with our program. The county then received additional funding that disallowed any kind of double dipping for resources. So then it became prohibitive for the city to be able to provide assistance in addition to the county assistance. Currently, all of those funds have been expended. There are also legal resources that the county has been funding, and the city also funds to provide assistance to tenant that might be facing some sort of eviction action against them. But in terms of financial resources, historically, the county has provided emergency assistance for individuals who, if they can just get through this month and they'll be able to get through next month, they'll have that temporary assistance. But it's usually one time. It's not for ongoing resources to help cover the rent.
Okay, that's the end of my questions then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to now open up. Let me go back to, I'd like to close question period and open up for public comment. And let me see if we have any anybody that wants to make a public comment. And of course, we have our resident housing expert, community organizer, Ro Aguilar. You may queue up.
There we go. I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay. I do want to congratulate the city of Hayward for completing the Hayward housing element because it's been quite a task, and I think you deserve congratulations being one of the few cities that's done this. For over 2 years, I have advocated for a plan revision to require developers to build inclusionary housing, particularly owner-occupied units. Although the City Council has decided the plan will include many wonderful policies and lots of incentives and waiver options to encourage developers to build affordable inclusionary housing, the final decision remains with the developer: build on site or pay an in lieu fee. Over the next 8 years, the city will be measuring outcomes to see if this model of incentives is successful in achieving the plan's housing goals, affordable housing goals. This measure of outcomes is most important, especially calculating the numbers of affordable inclusionary units that did not get built because the developer decided to pay an in lieu fee. So we not only have to keep track of the inclusionary housing, we have to keep track of how many did not get built because the developer decided to pay an in lieu fee. Based on the city's feasibility study, inclusionary residential development is economically feasible in the single family, moderate and low income housing category. So we could just, target that category now, even if we wanted to require developers. Inclusionary housing is a key policy in creating upward mobility and home ownership. This is why I'm on this case. A primary path for creating wealth among lower income and disadvantaged populations. One Harvard study noted that the more cross-class interaction people, particularly children, have, the greater the chance to move into the middle class. All affordable housing is not equal in achieving this outcome. Location within a higher income neighborhood that is inclusionary is a critical factor. Providing affordable housing in crisis is getting worse. I hope developers will take the responsibility to build affordable inclusionary housing seriously. If the numbers don't confirm this direction, the city must make an effective equity-based change, of course, and require every residential development in the specified category include a percentage of moderate low-income inclusionary units. Let's house Hayward. Thank you. I'm sending that out to the clerk.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I don't see any more public comments, and so I'd like to return to the dais and see if we have any speakers, and then Council or Mayor Pro Tem Andrews.
Just want to thank you for the presentation. I actually love the graphics. They're very easy to follow. I know that's not easy to do that, so I just want to say thank you for that, because it's easy for the community to see a full picture of what's happening with housing, just from demographics perspective, also what developers are what they need to look at in order to build that housing. So thank you so much. I also appreciate it, Ms. Aguilar's comments as usual. And I know that it's very hard to hear, and I still struggle with it, but we have to get the developers on board with inclusionary housing, but it seems like it's just really hard to get that higher percentage for the variety of factors that were listed in the plan here. And maybe things will change. Maybe we could push for more change, but as of right now, there's just a lot of factors that are making that 20% affordable very difficult. So I'm hoping that things will change in the future, but I do like the plan that's listed out here today. Some of the things that we also highlighted was the environmental justice and safety element, and I look forward to seeing those elements. And it is a lot to take on, so I understand. But it also speaks to a lot of things that I know that I really advocated for when I was on the Planning Commission, was looking at it from an environmental justice view, looking at it from an equity lens, all those times where I sounded crazy about, you know, can we look at CEQA with an equity lens? This is exactly what I'm talking about, is looking at another element to see how this impacts the community in a social justice perspective. So looking forward to learning more about how this is going to be applied and what we're going to do. And then also for the program for seniors or for anyone who needs assistance, I love hearing that. I love that people are taking advantage of that. I haven't heard a ton of people ask me about this, so I was very happy to see this in the report. And I know that Keep Hayward Clean and Green is looking at a program where they want to help seniors fix up their yards, so maybe there's some synergy that can happen where they can learn more about this program as they're assisting on that program. And I am interested in seeing what we can do with BART. You know, one of the things that we hear a lot about is that people would love to take BART more, but they're concerned about their cars, and what's happening with catalytic converters, breaking in the windows, and this can also help with some of that activity that we see at BART station parking lots if we can actually use those lots for more community engagement, housing, instead of it sitting empty and attracting all kinds of nefarious activities. And then also it can support ridership. So I would love to see what we can do. I understand the city manager's concern of us taking on other agencies' work, but it does impact us having that lot sit like that with nothing there. It really does. It's a community eyesore, impacts our public safety. So I think it could be worthwhile for us to engage in some kind of conversation to speed this up. I also feel like it can spur more economic development if we're able to partner and get more retail and more pop-ups or whatever it is to happen at that lot. That would be great. So other than that, I would just, great job. I know this was probably one of the longer staff reports. I sympathize with you. I am you, so I know these staff reports are very difficult. So thank you for taking the time and really synthesizing a lot of information for the community. And yes, you were right. You were everywhere. Every community event, I pretty much think I've seen you at every community event over the past summer with the housing element. So good job on outreach.
Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Leah, thank you so much. This is just an amazing effort, and getting to be part of it during the Planning Commission, it was great because I feel like a lot of my concerns were answered then. But thank you, and Christina and Jason from REINCON and Kelly and everyone that's moved this forward. Because I'm really proud of what we're doing in Hayward. I mean, Hayward is earnestly trying to meet our RHNA goals. We're actually zoned for all of it. I mean, that's more than most cities are doing in the state. And so I think we're so far ahead of the curve, we just need to get people to come and build and make it affordable and all of those other huge hurdles that I know will be hard to make. But I just feel like we're honestly trying to do this, and other cities are working really hard to actually avoid it. So I think that just says a lot about what we're trying to do in Hayward, and I'm really proud of that. And thank you. Yeah, I thought the graphics were great too. I really liked the wheel where you highlighted the topic as you went around. That was such a great visual. Thank you for that. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that we'll be talking about sort of electric retrofitting for appliances and things like that when it comes to the caps. I'll be looking forward to that later, and making sure we're integrated that with our housing program. But I do want to go back to what we talked about earlier about the inclusionary versus in lieu, and I really appreciate Mr. Morales' comments that, of course, we need in lieu fees in order to build those affordable units. But I also would like our stated policy to be that you build inclusionary, and I appreciated Ms. Aguilar's comments that it is in the hands of the developer. And it seems to me if we put it in the hands of staff, we made it discretionary for staff, it's still sort of that we have an effective outcome that there are some projects that will be appropriate for in lieu fee. But if the strong stated policy from Hayward is you build inclusionary to this percentage, unless it's staff discretion that in lieu fees are appropriate. I mean, I would be interested in just hearing if, I don't know, what that does to the element. Does that make it more difficult to get it approved? Maybe that was a question I should have asked earlier. Maybe, Kelly, that's something you can ask, or Aaliyah. What do you think that does with our HCD?
Well, the housing element doesn't actually, it just contains implementation programs. So
Okay.
as City Manager McAdoo pointed out, in the implementation of the various actions in this document, you'll be able to sort of pull out all those pieces you just talked about.
Okay.
And the affordable housing ordinance is actually coming back in, I think, in the next month.
Okay.
For discussion.
So we
you'll
can address that then.
Yeah, and so that's what I was trying to say is like some of these, we're just saying we're doing this.
Okay.
And then the council can dive into all the weeds at once.
Okay.
When it
Later.
comes back to you as a
on
policy
each
discussion.
element, on each
Yeah,
piece
exactly,
of it. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, then I'll wait for that because it's something I'm interested in getting back to. Beyond that, thank you, and I'm excited about this.
So I want to, let me just say this. One, I just wanted to say thank you to staff. And I have to agree with Mayor Pro Tem Andrews. Your staff was everywhere. I mean, even during, even during a pandemic, you guys were out there. There were vaccination events and you were out there. You were in elementary schools, you were in parks. There might have been 2 people, there might have been, 75 people, and you were there. And that's, if anything, I think the community should see that that's the commitment, and on weekends, right? On weekends, this is the commitment that staff has applied to this process and to our housing policy and our housing goals. So I think that's great, and thank you for that. We are doing our share. I think historically we are doing our share, as you clearly have articulated and have shown in the document. The one ask I would say is, and I don't know if it's being done. I hope it is. That tomorrow or in the next day or two that we put out a press release as to what we're doing and really direct people to this document. This is a great, this is, I think at a high level, this directs people's attention to the work we've done, to the historical work we've done to some extent. And I think it's a great conversation starter, at least when we start to proceed and dive into more of the detailed policies that as we will be hearing in the days to come, in the months to come. So with that, I'd like to move staff's recommendation.
I'm requesting to speak.
The what? No, I know, but we've closed public comments. We're on the second round of questions, correct? Yeah. So I'd like to move public comment, or I'd like to move staff's recommendation.
We can still deliberate.
Yeah, we can still deliberate. Yes. So I'd like to move staff.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Point of order.
Yes. We're still deliberating. So I would like to move staff's recommendation, and I have a second by Councilmember Zermeño, and now we have moved by me, second by Councilmember Zermeño, and let me go back to my questions. Councilmember Zermeño.
Thank you. Again, everything's good about this project. We really need to go out, tell public what we're doing with this. Let's send a note to Newsom also at the same time. And just to answer colleague Andrew's query about BART, just up to a while ago, we had a JPA with BART, and colleague Lamner and I were part of it. It has been dissolved. And every time we met, I kept pushing. When are you developing? the 2 BART stations. It's time to do it. And they all say, yes, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So if we could do anything to speed up at least the downtown BART, because that would be tremendous. That's, as I told BART folks, this is transit-oriented, 50 feet away from the BART station. What are you waiting for? And besides, it's a win-win situation because we would get rid of that ugly chain link fence that's there. That's an entry into our downtown. So anyway, so next time I see McFarland and everybody else, that's what I'm gonna tell them. Okay, so colleague Andrews, excellent. And anytime you run into BART folks, let them know. And again, thanks for the good, excellent report.
I think you were referring to Director McPartland, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Councilmember Syrup.
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize for being out of order earlier. I was a little confused on process. Sometimes we get a second on the motion, we jump straight to a vote, and I'm like, hold on. A few quick comments. Just want to note that Ro Aguilar did send an email wanting to have her husband's name corrected to her name in our housing element. Just want to make sure that's noted. I also want to note that while this wasn't part of the motion taken by the Planning Commission, there was a desire to revisit and strengthen our rental stabilization ordinance. Obviously, that will come into implementation later down the line, but I just wanted to note that too. And then just a point of clarification, the builder's remedy, I believe it was any development gets approved as long as it includes 20% affordable, but that also meant that it could be as tall as it wanted to be, and that's what we were seeing in Santa Monica. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had those details right. And I think one of the questions I had asked about the housing element was just revisiting how Hayward is zoned. And so as we start thinking about implementation, I think a larger conversation about rezoning maybe larger portions of Hayward to accommodate new development could be one of the ways that we reduce our governmental constraints. I want to echo what Councilmember Andrews and Councilmember Zermeño said about developing the BART station. Sooner is obviously better. I understand that BART is prioritizing based on commuter usage, so that's why we are on the timelines that we're on. My final project for my post-batch in city planning was to redesign the Ashby BART station. That was what we had to submit. So this project's very near and dear to my heart. I would love to see that in Hayward. And then to that point, I also want to ask staff how we can be a resource. And of course, this is a conversation we can have offline. But like Zermeño said, we can talk to BART directors. Any way that we can help push that project forward or at least encourage conversations in light of a JPA being dissolved, I still think there's a role that we can play. And I'd like to know what that role could be. Just a comment, were a lot of these public outreach events, which were phenomenal, were they published on the community calendar on the website? And is that common practice for a lot of our divisions to, I believe the city clerk manages the calendar, are we doing that frequently? Question, comment, yeah.
I believe if staff is coordinating with our community and media relations division, then yes, they're all synced up. Whenever we post an event on social media, it usually gets added to the community calendar.
Okay.
So I think we've been getting better about having staff work directly with community and media relations as they're mapping out engagement strategies. So.
Okay, great. And if there are certain events that we're not doing that for, just a reminder that we can do that to solicit more community input. And then the comments that Councilmember Roach made about inclusionary housing being the standard, obviously are a conversation for later this month, but I'm in support of them. And then I think the major comment I wanted to make here, and City Manager McAdoo, I really meditated on, is this implementation or is this an amendment? And I do think it falls under the category of amendment. So what I would start with is saying that I believe Councilmember Goldstein raises an important point about addressing our housing cost burdened residents' needs, and I'm happy to talk about solutions for driving down rent all day. What I understand this document is trying to accomplish before us is planning for new development and how we protect our current housing stock. And so I'm going to evoke a council member that's not here currently, a former council member, Al Mandel, and say we need data, and we are in a crisis and need data. I would like to suggest an amendment to the housing element that a new action be added to program H2 on page 65 and give folks time to turn there if they want to. But my hope is to develop a rental registry. A rental registry is a tool that can be used by residents and code enforcement to provide more frequently updated a more frequently updated database of Hayward's rental housing stock. It can also help streamline mediation between tenants and landlords, which I think would free up staff time. And it also improves compliance with rental laws. And so my hope would be a rental registry with a timeline and objective date of implementation by January 2025. Obviously, there's a number of policies that go from drafting it to actually creating it. But I think this would be a valuable program to incorporate as it relates to enforcement. It doesn't really neatly fit into Action 2.1 of systemically inspecting rental units. I think this could actually help augment and improve it. And I would encourage my fellow council members to support this amendment to give us more data. We are in a housing crisis. I think we could use the data. The data we get on vacant units is once every census, which I don't think is very frequent if we're in a crisis. And the information that we get from our rental inspections is 750 multifamily units and 250 single-family homes every 3 to 4 years, and I just don't think that's adequate for us to be able to get the data that we need and act on it appropriately. So that is my suggested amendment to the motion, and I hope there's a second.
Councilmember Syrup, I apologize for interrupting you, but I wanted to ask our housing manager if she's still online. I believe we implemented a rent registry when we did the rent stabilization ordinance, so I'm just curious if there's, and maybe Christina can explain a little bit about that, but I'm just curious if something's missing from that registry that you want to add to it. So that would be go ahead, Chris.
Yes, so we have an inventory of the rental units in the city of Hayward, but we don't, excuse me, I think I have only one piece of my headset in. But we don't have an actual registry per se that tracks the rents. So part of the changes we made in the last residential rent stabilization ordinance is that the property owners, the landlords, had to submit rent increase notices to the city and termination notices so that we could try to start tracking some of the data in terms of the reasons for terminations, and also to kind of see what impact we've had on the renting, what impact the ordinance has on the actual rent increases, because the data we received in terms of market conditions shows us what the asking rents are, not necessarily what rent increases are. So the information we have is limited to the number of individuals or landlords that have complied. And since there's no enforcement mechanism to supply that information, it's basically an honor system that the information is being supplied to the city. So a rent registry would require that the property owner actually submit information on what the rents are, unless you're just looking for a rental property inventory that identifies what the units are. If that's the case, we have that.
Thank you. And to your question, City Manager McAdoo, it would be more enforceable, a more enforceable registry, one that does track rents, security deposits, and other information. I think beginning the process of developing that would be significant. And of course, when it comes to actually exacting any fees on property owners, that would be a discussion or an ordinance that would have to come before council.
So, I mean, I don't, if the council majority supports including that, I don't think that would be considered a substantive change to the housing element that would potentially delay it with HCD. So, and just because you're adding it doesn't mean that it's officially getting adopted. There would be staff research, outreach, a whole implementation plan that would go along with it. So I think that's up to the council's prerogative on whether to include that as part of the housing element.
I do want to add this, and so we're on the you and Councilmember Goldstein and I are on the Homelessness and Housing Task Force. The registry came out of the task force, and perhaps what we can do, in fact, we can agendize this as like the very first thing we do on the next meeting, is have a review of the database, and then wherever we need to enhance it, we can do it there, and then bring it back to council, and we can certainly agendize that first, the first top priority of the committee.
My initial reaction is I would like to see this be a long-term priority for the city, and so I trust that we could follow that process, and that might be the appropriate way to go about it, and maybe that's more of the question of implementation, but I think setting this as a vision to me is, and putting a timeline around it as part of our overall housing strategy is what's significant to me, and incorporating that into our general plan. So I would still like the motion to be on the table. And if there's a second, I would appreciate that. And if not,
Sure.
not, yeah.
Okay. So there is a motion to include, I'll say, to include a database.
An enforceable rental registry?
An enforceable rental registry. Yeah, an enforceable rental registry, and include that in the.
As an action under program H2.
Yeah. Ms. Schmidt.
Apologies through the chair. I'm not sorry.
Yeah, no,
jumping
go
in
ahead.
there.
Go ahead, Ms. Schmidt.
I think this is a great idea. I think it is really, I just feel that maybe if Sarah Bowser is on, this is not something that I would have to do. And I just think there needs to be some thought about how this fits into the strategic roadmap and the staffing impacts this is really going to have on our already stretched thin code enforcement division. This housing element was written in conjunction with multiple divisions, and when we require these things to be done, it does have impacts on workload, staffing, funding, and all of that. So if someone could speak to what that might do.
I just think that we can, I mean, I think then it becomes a prioritization. We've got, I mean, the housing element implemented, is it 8 years, 10 years, 8 years. So there's an 8-year time frame. So I think there can be a prioritization discussion as part of the strategic roadmap retreat in early March if the council, adds this program, and so that we can talk about where it fits in with the workload that's already on the plate. So I wouldn't recommend agendizing it for the next Housing and Homelessness Task Force. Let's talk about how it fits in with everything else that is just on the plate right now.
Done. I like colleague Syrop's thoughts and ideas, and I also like Mayor Salinas' thoughts about it going to the task force first, and then from there coming up with some nice, solid recommendation to this body, so then we can work on it. So the idea is good. We should have some registry. That's excellent. But this may not be the time. And that's why I like the mayor's thoughts of taking it to your task force and getting some input from the community at that particular task force meeting, and then coming back. And then this way, at at that time, the staff can start preparing for that eventuality.
Yeah.
So.
Mayor Pro Tem Andrews. What was that? Okay, Councilmember Goldstein, sure.
Thank you both. I can speak on.
Sure.
Yeah, it is a worthy thing to pursue. We're really used to spending more time considering all the ramifications because it kind of sounds like a simple and very logical request, but it's got a rippling effect on other priorities and potentially expenses that we're not yet aware of. And so I like the idea, but I think for the reasons stated, I think following your plan, bringing it up at the Housing Task Force first and then seeing what comes out of that and then bringing it back, and then that would also give staff some time to look into it and kind of figure out where the whole thing fits.
Okay. I'm going to, Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize, but something's going on. My request to speak button isn't working. But I appreciate the deliberation, and I don't want to further confuse things. But I think since this is a council meeting, we're all hearing the information at the same time, I would strongly encourage my colleagues and Councilmember Syrop to bring this up during our strategic planning for the roadmap. You have my support on it, but because this is going to take staff analysis, I think it's important whether it lands with the committee or the entire council. The fact that the discussion is being brought forward in front of the entire council, I think it might make the most sense to do it during the strategic roadmap planning. So I would support those efforts, and I know we already have a maker and a motion, so I'm happy to vote on that, but just appreciate everyone's input and staff's work on this. Thank you.
No, okay. Okay, so it looks like I don't think we got.
I still had a request to speak. I don't know if it went down, but I think I'm trying to interpret the comments that staff made and the comments I'm hearing from my colleagues. So what I'm asking for is in the next 8 years, we address this issue. I'm not asking for an immediate adoption of this policy. It's more an overall direction. I think what I heard from staff was it would actually be beneficial to not bring it up in housing and homelessness immediately. It should come up in our strategic roadmap prioritization conversation. So I think what I'm looking for here is just to set a mission that we are going to find a way to best implement some type of rental registry. That's all I'm asking for. No staff expenditure. We'll figure out what that looks like at the strategic roadmap. So I think what I'm trying to understand is, of the comments and the feedback I received, based on the information, I guess, are we on the same page? I'm not asking for any staff commitment or time or resources outside of saying this is a North Star, that in the next 8 years in this housing element, this is something that we're trying to accomplish. So I don't understand what the resistance is. But we decide the implementation later, I think, is what I'm trying to understand.
So let's back up. So we have, so are you clarifying your motion? So your motion is, so what's your motion now?
My motion is for, in the next 8 years, in this housing element, that we develop some type of enforceable rental registry under program H2. That's all the motion is, and that can happen anytime in the next 8 years.
Okay, so that's the motion. Is there a second to his motion?
It's actually a friendly amendment. It's not.
Or, I'm sorry.
It's a friendly amendment, yes.
Is there a second to his friendly amendment?
Yeah. No, first the maker has to agree, and then the seconder has to agree. So does the maker agree?
Oh, I'm the maker. No, I don't agree.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I rather would wait.
Okay.
So I don't agree either. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So, if there are no other comments, Madam City Clerk, you can take the roll.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Andrews?
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein?
Yes.
Councilmember Marquez?
Aye.
Councilmember Roach?
Yes.
Councilmember Syrup?
Yes, phenomenal work, staff.
Thank you. Councilmember Cermeño? Mayor Salinas?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it unanimously passes. Thank you. Okay. Next item is legislative business, which is salary plan amendment. Adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the City of Hayward salary plan for the fiscal year 2023. And I believe our Human Resources Director, Ms. Fry, will launch this.
Yes, thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So good evening. I will try to maintain brevity today. So staff is asking council to adopt a resolution approving an amendment to the City of Hayward salary plan for fiscal year 2023. In August 2022, HR completed total compensation market studies for unrepresented executive employees. This slide shows the methodology that was used to determine equity increases for these classifications. This methodology is outlined in the HAME MOU and is the same methodology that was used in determining the equity increases that were brought to council and approved on January 17th for the council appointed officers. Based on the findings of the market study, it was determined that 8 classifications should receive equity adjustments effective the pay period, including January 1st, 2023. Those classifications include the assistant city manager, the chief of police, and the deputy city manager, all receiving an increase of 3%, with the director of development services receiving a 5% increase. As you can see, the fiscal impact is outlined in the right-hand column of the chart. However, it's important to note that the deputy city manager and the director of development services are not currently included in the budget, therefore resulting in no immediate impact to the fiscal year 2023 budget. Moving through the classifications, it was also determined that the Director of Finance and the Director of Public Works shall receive a 3% increase, with the Director of Library Services and the Director of Maintenance Services receiving a 5% increase. Additionally, in December of last year, HR completed a total market study for the assistant to the city manager, which indicated the position was 19.3% below the market median. Based on the findings, the assistant to the city manager shall receive a salary adjustment of 10% effective November 7th, 2022, and a 9% adjustment next fiscal year effective the pay period that includes July 1st, 2023. The total fiscal impact of all adjustments for fiscal year 2023 is $52,637. And staff is recommending that council adopts a resolution approving the revised salary plan for fiscal year 2023. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open up for questions of council. Seeing no questions, I'll close questions and open up for public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a public comment? Anybody online? Nobody online? I'd like to close public comment and bring it back up here on the dais, and I'll entertain a motion or a question.
I'll move.
Moved by Councilmember Goldstein.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Roche. And Madam City Clerk, you can take the roll.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Andrews.
Aye.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez.
Aye.
Councilmember Roach.
Yes.
Councilmember Syrup.
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño.
Yes.
Mayor Salinas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to move to council reports and announcements. Seeing none, I'd like to close council reports and announcements. And since there are no council referrals, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening. Meeting's adjourned.
Re-